What's up everyone, Steven here from TechMaker. This is Building an NFT Bookstore Part 6. In this episode, we're going to continue with adding the ability to actually purchase a book from an author. In the last episode, we did add quite a bit of complexity to our code. So depending on the amount of time it's taking us, we may do a little bit of code cleanup once we get a little bit more of the functionality implemented. Or that may be in the next episode. And I've been kind of looking things over, and it was a little chaotic when I was doing it. But it's not really all that crazy at the moment. I mean, there's not a lot of code here, so there's not too much going on. But I would like to at least think about it, so we may do a little bit of that in this episode or the next. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is actually go ahead and implement the purchase functionality to its completion so that we actually transfer the tokens to the author from the buyer and make sure that that works. So let's go ahead and start with that. So one thing that we did in the last episode here is we added this big test with a bunch of stuff. And we kind of wrote a generic test, and we said it allows an account to purchase a book version. And that's what you would expect, right? But what we really want to do is test a smaller chunk of behavior. I don't want to be trying to test like the entire purchase function in one test. So what I want to do is rephrase this, because what this test is really doing is actually testing that we transfer to the buyer. So what we want to do is basically say it transfers a book version to the buyer. Okay. What I want to do now is copy this test, and we can put this. I'm actually going to put this above because it's sort of something that should come first in a way. But I'm going to say it transfers the purchase tokens to the author. Okay. And so what we're doing, if we just kind of review this, we have the storefront contract, the bookstore that we're setting up. We're setting the bookstore on the storefront, which basically connects, like, think of this like a front of house, and this is sort of your back end, like your warehouse or something. Maybe we should call that the warehouse. That could be interesting. I kind of like literal names sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little too cute, and it's not necessarily a good thing. In any case, so we have our buyer, we have our purchase token, and this is actually something we didn't really use in the last episode, but we set up this ERC20 token, which is where that's this purchase token, right? And basically we give 1 million, let me check my decimals, or not decimals, my, anyway, orders of magnitude there. So we have 1 million on this buyer account. So then we come down here, we're setting the price. I'm going to set this to be, let's make this a really expensive book. Let's make it 5,000 of these tokens, whatever it is. And we're going to only create 10 of them. Not that any of this matters, but I do like to change some of the numbers around just a little bit. So let's have a look at this. So now we're saying await storefront purchase from author. And then we're testing basically the balance of the buyer. One thing we need to do down below, and I'm going to make a little note down here, is we need to check the balance of the author just to double check and make sure that that's actually accurate, that it should go down one. But what I want to do up here is I want to check that the the purchase token balance of the author has gone up. So let's say let balance equal, and then we'll say we don't need to parse int here, I don't think. What I'm going to do is say web3.utils.from way, and then we'll say in here, I'm just going to say await. And then I'm kind of doing something that I normally do in 2 lines in 1 line here. So we'll see how that goes. But what I'm going to do is say purchase token, balance of, and then who's the author? Author is there. And I want to convert that into Ether. I think that should work. So basically, if you followed along, you should have seen that before. Basically, I just put 2 lines in 1. I'm going to see how that goes. So now what I want to do is say assert that balance is equal to the string 1,000 or 5,000, since we said it was 5,000. If you're confused by why it's a string, it just has to do with the fact that these Web3 utilities use strings, and so on and so forth. So we could parse that into an integer, but I don't see the point. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. It should come back and say their balance is 0, and we have a failing test. But let's see. This will take just a second. The other reason to split these things into multiple tests is it makes it a little bit easier when we read it. Okay, so I'm going to say let author, well, let's just say balance equals. We can reset it. It's fine. Okay. But the reason it's useful to split these tests up is when it prints out, it's a little bit easier to see what's failing than if you blend a whole bunch of concepts together. So generally following the single responsibility principle will work out in your benefit. Okay, so we get 0. First of all, we get a bunch of events here, if you're curious to read through that. But basically we get what we expect. We wanted 5,000, we got 0 because we haven't actually transferred anything that yet. So what we're going to have to do, the buyer is going to have to give an approval for this storefront contract to take money out of its wallet, basically. The reason for that is because basically we're executing this transaction, and inside of our smart contract, the contract needs to be able to pull money from the buyer and send it to the author. So we need to authorize that contract to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is say, where do we actually do that? Okay, here we go. So we'll just say await, and we'll say purchase token dot approve, and we'll pass in, let's check the ERC20, IERC20. Is that a thing? No. Well, it is a thing, but I don't know if I can search for it like that. Let's search for ERC20 here. IERC20. Okay, so the allowance and the approve function are 2 functions that go together. Basically what we can do is we can approve a contract to be able to spend a particular amount, and then later the way a lot of this stuff works is the contracts internally will check that we actually have that allowance, and if they do, then we will allow them to transfer tokens on their behalf. Okay. If you want to know more about ERC20, feel free to read up on that elsewhere, or I think I have some other videos about it. I don't know how much I explained in depth or not, but there's a lot of videos out there about ERC20. So what we need to do is pass in an address and an amount to approve. And so we want to approve our storefront dot address, and we want to approve, we could do as much as we want. We could do the whole balance. You know, a lot of times what happens is you will actually pass in like the biggest number possible, just so that we don't have to ask for allowances all the time. You can think about that on your own if that's a good idea or not for your use case. But for this use case, I'm just going to go ahead and do 1 million, since that's the total supply that I have. Yeah. Okay, so we want to go ahead and approve, and we can actually we can comment that line out first and then try to write the code, and just so you see it fail. So the storefront, what we can do here is in the purchase, what we can do is say first of all, I need to get the author. Okay, so we'll say address author equals, and then we'll say bookstore dot get, what is it? Get author somewhere. I need a maybe I don't have a function. We'll write a function down here. Function book version author, which is going to take in this kind of same deal. Actually, I can just copy all of the rest of that. So it's going to take in a book version ID. It's going to return an address. And basically all I need to do is copy this line. And again, you know, this is sort of like what happens to me when I'm writing TDD. Like I could pause right here and go, oh crap, I need to write a test for the book version author. And we probably should come back and write one, but at the same time, like I need this to make another failing test pass, which kind of makes what I'm doing right now more of an integration test than a unit test, if you think about it. I mean, if you're following like a really strict TDD, what you might do is map out, okay, what API does my bookstore backend need to have? What API does it need to have based on what the storefront needs? And you would write a unit test and everything for the bookstore specifically. So this isn't exactly pure TDD, I suppose. But anyway, so what we'll do is we'll say book version author, and then we're passing in the book version ID. Why is that yellow? Oh, because I haven't used it yet. And then what we want to do is say we need a token, right? So first of all, what we need to do is have the ERC20 functionality. So what I mean by that is like we haven't imported ERC20 in here anywhere, so we don't know how to actually transfer anything. So if we go over to bookstore, I'm going to copy this and we'll pop back over to our storefront. And in here, what we're going to do is say ERC20 and ERC20 like that. And what that lets me do is wrap addresses with the ERC20 contract. And basically what we're saying is like this address is an ERC20 contract, and I want you to look at that address, and then we're going to be able to call functions against that address. So hopefully that makes more sense in a second. So what we can do is say ERC20 purchase token equals, and then what we'll do is say bookstore dot book version currency like this, right? And that's going to return an address. And so what I want to do is wrap this ERC20 and convert that into an actual token, if you see what I'm saying. So basically what's happening here is we're getting an address back from this function, right? That returns an address, and then the ERC20 wrapper says take this address and wrap this ERC20 contract around it. And that works because that address is an actual contract, and that lets us call functions. So hopefully that's semi-clear. Next thing we need to do is say uint 256, and we'll say purchase price equals, and that's maybe we can just say price, like price is shorter, and we'll say bookstore dot book version price like that. Okay, so now if we open back up our ERC20 interface so we can see what the methods are, you can see here that we have a transfer from function that's defined on the ERC20 spec. And basically we're going to pass in the sender first, then the receiver, and the amount. And this is different than just a straight up transfer, right? Because where's transfer? Transfer is recipient and amount. And so basically transfer is a function that only you can execute because it's sending it from self, basically. Transfer from is a contract where we're saying, or a function where we're saying, I'm transferring on somebody else's behalf, which is why we have to give that allowance. So we should see this fail in a second because we commented that out. But let me double check that again really quick. So it's sender, recipient, amount. So what we want to do is say purchase token dot transfer from, and then we're going to say message dot sender. So whoever called this function, transfer from them. The recipient should be the author, and then the amount should be the price, like that. And this should clear up all of our errors and warnings because now we're using all of our variables. And I'm going to just sort this for a second just to kind of, the token seems like logical that it's first and then the author and the price. Okay, let's run our test and see what happens. I'm thinking we're going to get a revert, and it's going to tell us, hey, you can't transfer that because you have not given the proper allowance. And if not, then I'm going to be alarmed. But okay. Yeah, transfer amount exceeds allowance. Okay, so let's come back over here and let's uncomment this line. Okay, and let's run this again. And it's probably going to fail once because I need to copy that line into both tests actually. Which is kind of a thing, like we haven't gotten into like before blocks and that's still failing. Transfer amount exceeds allowance. Let's see. Await, approve, storefront address, 1 million ether. That's weird. Purchase token, approve, storefront address. You know what? It's because I didn't pass in the buyer address here. Because as I said before, if we execute this by default, it's from accounts 0. So we need to make sure that we say that it's from the buyer. Otherwise, it won't work, obviously. So let's give this a shot. If this works, we'll copy that down onto the next test, and we should be all green. And this is taking longer than I thought, so I'm going to probably wrap the video up here. Okay, so now we got one failing. One more shot here, and where did I put that? I put it in the same place. We really, so one thing you have to do if you're doing this sort of development where you're writing a lot of tests is you actually have to do, you have to refactor your tests. And so one of the things that we'll probably do once we get a bunch of tests written, you don't want to start too early. A lot of people start writing like before blocks, exceeds balance. Where did I put it in the wrong spot? Let's see here. Transfers version to the buyer. Huh, that's weird. Hold on a second. So I just realized what happened. Down here, I have another test that I forgot about where I ran this again with a different person than the buyer. So we were actually running this here with accounts 9. So what I need to do in this test is actually transfer some tokens to accounts 9 so that it actually has some. This is where some of this gets kind of complicated. We may actually want to split this up into some different scenarios. We'll say purchase token dot transfer. And again, we need to pass in accounts 9. We'll pass in web3 utils.toWay. We'll do just the amount. Well, let's do 500,000. Why not? And then we need to say from buyer. Okay. We don't need this little test here anymore. This was always just kind of a stand-in. It's not really doing anything. Let's go ahead and approve. We can actually leave that to 1 million. It doesn't matter. Like that. And the reason it doesn't matter is because you can approve like the biggest number possible. Like if there's 1 million tokens, you can approve billions and billions or trillions or whatever of tokens. It doesn't matter. Whatever the biggest UNT 256 number is, you can approve that amount, and it basically just sets it to the max. So we're approving 1 million. We don't need to set it to the specific balance of the person or whatever. So you got the purchase token transfer, accounts 9. We're sending 500,000 from the buyer. Okay. Then you come down here and accounts 9 is trying to buy a book. Okay. So they should have the money and it should be approved. Let's see if this works. And again, I've been having some issues with my audio. It might just be on my side. So I apologize. I'm working on getting some new mic gear and stuff in. So anyway, hopefully if you are having any issues with it, it gets better in the future. But with all that said, I think I'm going to wrap this up here because this video has gotten a little bit long and we are going into a holiday weekend. So I'm a little bit tied up today. So cool. Hopefully this is helpful. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. And if you got any questions, leave a comment below and I'll talk to you in the next one, probably tomorrow. All right. Peace.